Welcome back to Mystery and Murder Analysis by Dr. Phil. This is where we break down the twists and turns of some of the most fascinating and infamous cases that are in the news. What we do is dive into the minds of both victims and perpetrators, and I mean a deep dive of what drives the perpetrators and what impacts the victims the most, what breaks them, and what we can all learn from their stories. Now, this is our first episode back in a while, and we're going to really be bringing you some cutting-edge stories. I can tell you that my goal is for every one of these to add something to your understanding about some of these monsters that walk among us, to help you to be able to spot some of these people, to help you to understand maybe the early development of some of these folks, to help you, your children, your grandchildren, to be on the lookout. I don't want to make anybody paranoid, but I do want everybody to be situationally aware. Because if I can save one person from getting in a situation they could otherwise avoid, then this has all been worth it. Having been trained in forensic psychology, I've spent a lot of time interviewing, analyzing, breaking down what makes these people do what they do. Now, on this episode, we're taking a close look at the heartbreaking case of Gabby Petito, the young, beautiful, aspiring vlogger whose life was tragically cut short by her boyfriend, Laundrie. Now, I connected with Gabby's family in 2021, first speaking with her father, Joe Petito, when Gabby was missing, and later sitting down with her entire family to figure out what was going on. And at the time that started, she was missing, but we didn't know what her destiny was. Later, as you've probably seen recently, we did a 3-part documentary on Netflix, which is still there. They tell me it may be the most watched documentary of this kind in Netflix history. So please, let me invite you to go to Netflix and watch Gabby's story. I can tell you, in talking about her family, you would be hard-pressed to find a more loving, resilient group of people who have taken unimaginable loss and turned it into a force for good. While Gabby's tragic case captivated the media, her family has maintained the focus on her legacy and for raising awareness and advocating for the prevention of domestic violence, specifically with their creation of the Gabby Petito Foundation. I'm honored to have played a role in helping them share Gabby's story. As I say, not only through their appearances on my show, but also through the recent release of the record-breaking #1 Netflix documentary, American Murder, Gabby Petito, which I had the privilege of executive producing. Now, from the very start, I knew this case would be critical for us to cover. For women, and anyone for that matter, who may find themselves in a potentially toxic or dangerous relationship. Through my conversations with her family and the subsequent documentary, we've worked hard to share Gabby's story in a way that not only honors her life and the incredible person that she was, but also serves as a powerful warning, one that, as I say, hopefully can help save others. Now, from the outside looking in, Gabby and Brian seem like an attractive, healthy American couple. So how could a pair that looks like they're living so-called perfect lives on social media be hiding such dark secrets? Were there red flags? And what were the red flags that we should all look out for? Let's start these special episodes by getting to know Gabby and who she truly was, while also diving into the psychology of unhealthy relationships and domestic violence, intimate partner violence. Because this doesn't just happen with married couples, it happens with those who are close. We're going to look at the warning signs, the patterns, and how we can hopefully break the cycle for good. So first of all, who was Gabby? If you've ever stood in line at a grocery store or gone to a newsstand, you've likely seen her beautiful image staring back at you. Immortalized on magazine covers, her case capturing the nation's attention. Young, blonde, beautiful, and beaming with a radiant smile. Gabby exuded warmth and confidence, but beyond the headlines and photographs, who was she really? Everyone puts their best foot forward. Everyone puts on a social mask and tries to project their best self. Of course, I do it, you do it, everybody you know does it. We seldom go out and try to air our darkest secrets, our pain. On March 19th, 1999, Gabriel Venora Petito was born to parents Nicole Schmidt and Joseph Joe Petito in Blue Point, New York, a quaint town, a little more than an hour outside of Manhattan. Now, I have to point this out because this is such a rare and admirable quality about Gabby's family. When she was a baby, her parents, Nicole and Joel, split. But they were very mature about their breakup. And moving forward, they made sure to maintain a healthy relationship in which they could successfully co-parent. In fact, when Nicole and Joel went on to remarry Jim Schmidt and Terry Petito, they became a true second set of parents for Gabby. Between Gabby's parents, step-parents, and 6 younger siblings and half-siblings, Gabby was showered with love. And she was known to be a great big sister. Now, I want to point something out here that I have always said to fathers. You are so critical when you have a daughter. Because if you don't make your daughter feel special, if you aren't there to let her know that you love her and value her and teach her to love and respect herself, then when she gets out into the world, the first old boy that comes along and blows in her ear and tells her she's special will have too much influence and too much sway on her. But if you make her feel special, if she knows she's loved and valued and therefore values herself, that first old boy that comes along and blows in her ear and says, hey, you're really special. Instead of her being swept off her feet, she'll say, yeah, I know. Of course, I know that. And that inoculates her against being swept off her feet by just anybody. I say that to say she had that in spades. Both her father and stepfather loved her and treated her with tremendous respect and value. So she was not vulnerable to the first old boy that came along and told her she was special, because she had 2 father figures in her life that made it very clear to her that she was valued, that she was special. So she didn't hear this for the first time when she was dating someone. When I would later meet this whole family, who at the time were still fairly fresh in the process of grieving Gabby and her loss, I was profoundly impacted by their united front. They are a true modern-day family. And as I know from years of experience, that is not always an easy dynamic to navigate. From an early age, Gabby was bright, precocious, and brimming with energy. Now, this is according to her mother, Nicole. Nicole recalled that from the time Gabby was in preschool and could hold a pencil, she was drawing pictures. And throughout her brief yet vibrant life, it was clear that Gabby used visual art as a form of self-expression. Gabby was said to have an idealistic, passionate personality. And she was someone who marched to the beat of her own drum. She loved butterflies, the color aqua blue, sunflowers, and the famous Beatles song, Let It Be. In high school, she flocked to other students in the art community, seemingly finding her niche. It was during this time that Gabby would meet her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. Coming up, was it love at first sight with Gabby and Brian? You will find out when we come back. When my sleep was off, it felt like I couldn't show up as my best self. That's why I'm so excited to share something that makes a real difference. Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values, hard work and integrity, and delivering results. It's a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend packed with ingredients shown to improve sleep, so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. Beam has already improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep, helping people across the country wake up and feel their best. Here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/Dr. Phil and use code Dr. Phil at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Dr. Phil and use code Dr. Phil for up to 40% off. Support an American company, invest in yourself, and start getting your best sleep tonight. By all accounts, Gabby and Brian's relationship was a case of opposites attract. This was apparent from the very start. On the one hand, you would have Gabby, she's vivacious, the life of the party. She enjoys art and posting on social media. She could strike up a conversation with just about anyone. Everything I learned about her, everything that I saw from her past history, you'd think she could talk to a statue. Then you have Brian. Even when you see past footage or photos when he's smiling, there seems to be something not quite right. There's a loneliness, a solemnness in his expression, a more somber way of being. Despite his youth, Brian always looked many years older, which added to his air of seriousness. Fellow high schoolers would joke that he looked like a narc, a bit of a loner. Others remarked that Brian often ate by himself in the school cafeteria. Brian also drew, but his sketches featured characters like the Joker from Batman, or images of subjects in some kind of pain, which could have hinted at Brian's inner struggles. He allegedly suffered from anxiety and would often second guess or overanalyze his behaviors or choices in social situations. Suffice it to say, he just didn't have confidence in himself. But in high school, Brian decided to overhaul his image and his life. He got into yoga, he shed 40 pounds, and changed how he wore his hair. While he never became an extrovert, he just never became an outgoing life of the party, there was a noticeable shift in his demeanor, and it seemed to be a shift for the better. It seemed. Brian would later tell friends that the first time he saw Gabby, she was walking into a deli, and that for him was it. It was love at first sight, so much so that he just pulled over to talk to her. While the two did officially meet in high school, their paths came together romantically post-graduation. After high school, Gabby originally moved to North Carolina with her boyfriend at the time. Once there, she worked at a local seaside restaurant. Of course, Gabby's co-workers gravitated towards her there. And before long, she was promoted from working in the kitchen to being a front-of-house hostess, which suited her sparkling personality. She was out front, meeting and greeting people. Perfect fit for her. While Gabby did return to Long Island in 2019, she always knew that she wanted to travel. She wanted to see the world and was already fantasizing about her next journey and how that would take shape. Gabby wasn't one to let the grass grow under her feet. She had big plans and she wanted to lead an adventurous life. She wasn't reckless. I'm not suggesting that. She just wanted to make life an adventure. Brian, meanwhile, was apparently a bit directionless after high school and didn't really know what he wanted to do. He had overhauled his image, but that internal dialogue, it seems, was still there. He lacked the confidence to know what he wanted and go after it. College wasn't in his plans. At one point, everything he owned was stashed in the back of his car. He couch surfed, stayed with friends for a bit. He took a job at a local gardening center, but he didn't seem to have much passion about anything, really. He was kind of like an unguided missile. Until, that is, he started dating Gabby. Gabby seemed to become what Brian was passionate about. Once Brian and Gabby crossed paths again in 2019, the two quickly became an inseparable item. Although from the start, friends observed that Brian was the one who seemed to be driving the relationship forward, and you can well imagine what a catch Gabby is, especially for someone like Brian that didn't have a life plan. He didn't have a direction. He didn't have a goal. And then here comes this beautiful, passionate, vibrant, vivacious young girl. And she provides his life energy. Gabby's mother, Nicole, noticed the two were spending a lot of time together, but for a while, Gabby would insist, "No, we're just friends." The two even embarked on a road trip together, traveling from Long Island to California with a stop in Texas. During the entirety of that trip, Gabby posted many photos of herself taken by Brian, but she wouldn't post any pictures of them together on her Instagram page until about 8 months into their relationship. Now, from the beginning, Gabby and Brian's dynamic was a series of highs and lows. To their circle of friends, they either seemed madly in love or in the midst of a fight. This was an emotional roller coaster. Now, there were signs that this just wasn't a stable, harmonious relationship. Their fights weren't just ordinary disagreements. They could be intense and at times explosive. Coming up, the rules of fighting fair and where it broke down with Gabby and Brian. Let's cut to the chase. Your savings could be in serious trouble. When Elon Musk is out here warning us to brace for temporary hardship, you might want to listen. I trust Preserve Gold to safeguard my accounts, and I urge you to do the same. They're the only precious metals company I recommend. Are you going to sit back and hope for the best or take control of your financial future? Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue through 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505. That's Dr. PHIL to 50505 today. Now, throughout the course of my work in the relationship space, I've met thousands of couples. And I've found that while fights and disagreements between people are, of course, inevitable, it's crucial that if you're going to fight, and I'm using that synonymous with argue, not fisticuffs, that you fight fair. Now, what do I mean by that? First, let's talk about the relationship dynamic. If you have a healthy relationship, then both partners are on an equal footing, okay? They fight from positions of parity. If not, you see a lot of leveling. And let me explain what I mean with leveling, because it has a critical role in the dynamic of this relationship, and it will come to define the tragic outcome in the final analysis of Gabby and Brian's relationship. So I'm going to mention it early, and we'll come back to it at the end. When I talk about leveling, if you have an unhealthy relationship, one partner feels really disparate from the other. They feel like they're not on an equal footing, and leveling takes place. That is, one partner is always trying to level themselves with the other partner. And they can do this in one of two ways. They're either constantly trying to shoot down the other partner in terms of ego and self-esteem, like you're down on the ground trying to shoot down a hot air balloon and bring them down to your level. Or they're inflating their own ego and thumping their chest and having a false sense of superiority to raise themselves up to the other person's level, at least in perception. They don't necessarily feel that way, but they're trying to appear that way. So that's what I mean by leveling. One person feels very much inferior, so they're trying to bring the other person down or inflate their position so they at least appear to be on an equal footing. Another really unhealthy dynamic is if one partner is always pursuing the other and the other partner is always seeming to pull away from the other partner. If a relationship is defined by always pursuing or retreating, that's not a healthy relationship. If you're having to chase someone all the time, they're probably not the right partner for you, because the right partner won't run. And if you're always seeming to retreat or move away, it's probably a good reason. Something inside you is telling you, this is not the right place to be. This is not the right partner for me. It's true in life. It's true in relationships. If that door doesn't open, probably ain't your door. If you're going to fight fair, you'll take it private and keep it private. You don't fight in front of other people. You don't fight in front of family. You don't fight in front of friends. You just don't do it. You always keep it private. And if you're in a relationship and have children, you certainly don't fight in front of them, because it will scar them. And if you take these things public, it just means that you don't have self-control to contain yourself until you can go private. You want to keep your fights relevant. Don't bring up old grudges or sore points when they don't belong in a particular argument. You got to put boundaries around the subject matter, so that the fight doesn't deteriorate into a free-for-all. It's called gunny sacking. You don't keep things in a gunny sack, and anytime an argument comes up, you reach back, get things you were mad about 2 months ago, and swing it up and hit them in the head with it. You don't do that. Keep it current. Next, you need to keep it real. Deal with the issues at hand, not with a symptom of the problem. Be real about what's bothering you, or you'll come away with an exchange that's even more frustrating. And avoid character assassination. Stay on the issue. Don't get into the point of attacking your partner's personality. If it gets into name calling, or you're just like your mother, you're just like your father, or worse, just name calling, then you're way off task. Which is the next point. Know what you want when you go into the disagreement. If you don't have a goal in mind, what are you arguing after? What are you arguing for? You're just venting. You have to be goal-oriented. And you must allow your partner to retreat with dignity. How any argument ends is crucial. Always recognize when an olive branch is being extended to you, perhaps in the form of an apology or a joke. Give your partner a face-saving way out of a disagreement and be proportional in your intensity. Every single thing you disagree about is not earth-shattering, life-changing. If you only have one gear, something's wrong. And listen, there's got to be a time limit. Arguments should be temporary. So don't let these things get out of hand and take up the whole day. Those are the rules for fighting fair. Now, Gabby and Brian were in their early 20s and they were still finding their way in life. And I'm sure nobody sat down and said, listen, you guys seem to argue a lot, so let's learn how to do it. Let's follow some rules. I would give anything to have had the chance to sit down and talk to them about how to modulate these arguments. Young relationships are rarely without challenges, and at this stage in their story, it might seem like they were just two 20-somethings doing their best to navigate a serious but young relationship. The problem is, when you get in a relationship with somebody, they bring a lot of things to that relationship that either contaminate or contribute to that relationship. And what Gabby didn't know is that Brian was bringing a lot to this relationship that contaminated it, and very little that contributed to it. Was Gabby in an abusive relationship? Up next, I will analyze Brian's behavior and discuss signs of controlling behavior. Life is full of surprises, and emergencies often strike when we least expect them. But preparation is key, and that's where Jace Case comes in. With Jace Case, you'll have essential emergency prescription medications right at your fingertips, ready when you need them most. Whether it's an unexpected illness or a travel mishap, having the right meds on hand can turn a potential crisis into just a minor inconvenience. Don't let the unexpected catch you off guard. Jace Case gives you peace of mind so you can tackle life surprises with confidence. Be ready. Take charge today. Head over to jace.com. That's JASE.com. And when you check out, use the code PHIL, spelled PHIL, to get a discount on your order and to have the right meds on hand the moment you need them. What Gabby didn't know is that Brian was bringing a lot to this relationship that contaminated it, and very little that contributed to it. Think about him like he's carrying 2 big suitcases that are so heavy he can barely get them off the ground. And they're filled up with dark and sinister baggage, all things that are brewing within him. For example, Brian's former co-worker, Michael Livingston, would later tell the media that Brian had a chameleon-like personality. It seemed as though he would attempt to mold himself to be like whoever he was around. And this co-worker described Brian as a, quote, weirdo, and someone who, despite his seemingly even-keeled demeanor, was, quote, the kind of a guy who would get pissed off pretty quick, end quote. When Brian worked at the garden center, Gabby would often pop by for a visit, always friendly and outgoing. It wasn't unusual for Gabby to strike up conversations with others who were there. Michael alleged that while he never witnessed Brian fight with Gabby, he did note that he was very possessive and seemed to be aware of her movements at all times. For example, if Brian saw Gabby talking to another guy, he'd make sure to go up to Gabby, drape his arm around her, and even give her a peck on the cheek or a kiss, just to make clear, we're together. Now, I said envision him carrying some heavy bags. Let's remember, he was very introverted, ate lunch alone. We're talking about insecurities here. Talked about he didn't have direction, he didn't have passion, and then he is fortunate enough to cross paths with and connect with someone that would be a catch to anybody. How threatened he must feel. Like, oh my gosh, how could I be with someone like that? And be threatened by anyone that came around, because by comparison, he would think, oh, almost anyone could steal her away from me. So he becomes possessive, he becomes threatened. And would that contribute leveling? Now, at first, it might seem insignificant. Just a little jealousy, nothing unheard, maybe even seen as sweet or flattering. But in this case, like a pebble skimming across a pond, these small moments of possessiveness quickly rippled into something much bigger, turning into big red flags. Brian had a need to control Gabby because he was threatened. What if he lost her? If he feels like he didn't deserve her, that he couldn't hang on to her, then you tend to become desperate. Gabby's best friend, Rose Davis, said that Brian once took Gabby's wallet so she couldn't go out with the girls line dancing. Now, think about this. She's an adult, and she's wanting to go out with friends, and he takes her wallet to control her. That is a crystal clear forced isolation tactic. I've seen it in many abusive relationships where someone will take the car keys, not say anything about it, just take the car keys when they leave that morning and strand their partner at home. That's abuse. We think about abuse just as being physical, but there's mental abuse, psychological abuse, environmental abuse. He took her wallet so she couldn't go out. That's like taking the car keys so somebody can't leave, or making sure they don't have any money, or leaving the car empty of gas so they can't go anywhere. That is abuse. Rose also alleged that there were times that Brian's jealousy would get so out of control that Gabby didn't want to be around him. During those times, she would go stay with Rose to get what she called a breather from Brian. I think if we were able to interview Gabby now, she'd be able to tell us about a lot of Brian breathers she wanted to take. Brian would do nice things for Gabby only to then throw them back in her face when they bickered or he didn't feel like he was getting his way. This can be a classic manipulative move. Everything he did had strings attached. I did this for you. You owe me. I was nice to you, so you are now indebted to me. You owe me. Tit for tat. I did this, you must do that. I brought you flowers, you owe me this night. Keeping a tally of what you're doing for the other person. It's keeping score in a relationship. It's not organic. It's not emotionally driven. It's scorekeeping. Rose said, and we see it in text messages Brian sent, that it was a constant worry of Brian's that Gabby was going to leave him. Again, insecurity. That baggage he's dragging into this relationship that she now has to manage. Gabby, a social butterfly, became more isolated as her relationship with Brian became more serious. He resented her having friends, and of course he would. Because every other person is a threat. He's in competition with every other person, every other activity, everything that could distract her from him, everything that she could use as a yardstick to compare how she is being treated by him versus how others in the world would have something to offer her. Brian would say things to Gabby like, I can't live without you. While that initially sounds romantic, saying something like that can also be quite manipulative and cause the other person to feel guilt and immense pressure to stay in the relationship. There are so many controlling behaviors where people are actually being abused, but they don't ever label it that way. And my theory, what I'm putting forth here, is that Gabby Petito was in an abusive relationship with Brian Laundrie long before it was labeled and recognized. Abuse is not just physical, as I said. Excessive monitoring, frequently checking in, keeping track of whereabouts, or closely inspecting phone calls and messages. Brian was in constant communication with Gabby and would scold her if she didn't reply to him and reply to him promptly. I sent you a text or called you and you didn't answer right away. Why not? Who were you talking to? What were you doing? Who was distracting you? I'm your top priority. Why weren't you getting right back to me? You should be sitting there waiting for me to contact you. And if I'm your top priority, if you care about me, you would get right back to me. What was more important than me? That's the message. And you pay the price if you violate the expectation. One-sided decision-making. Making significant choices without consulting or considering the partner's perspective. Jealousy and control, displaying extreme jealousy, making accusations of infidelity or attempting to isolate the partner. Criticism and demeaning behavior. Constantly putting your partner down is part of this leveling I've talked about, to try to make them feel inadequate so you can control them. Manipulating them emotionally by using guilt, threats, or coercion to influence their actions. Or if they express feelings, you dismiss or minimize them, disregarding their emotions and experiences, and an unwillingness to compromise, refusing to find middle ground or accommodate their needs. And we know he was trying to get her to have one relationship in her life, and that was with him, discouraging her to have other relationships with other people, and using intimidation or threats to control the partner's behavior. Now, that's quite a list I've gone through, and I believe that every one of them was in Brian Laundrie's behavioral repertoire. Relationships built on control are about as sturdy as a house built on sand. Brian struggled with insecurity. That's what he drug into that relationship. You either bring things to the relationship that contaminate or contribute. What did he bring? Do critical thinking. Decide for yourself. Was he a contaminator or a contributor? Were his interactions such that his goal was to make her feel better about who she was? I don't think so. He needed her under his control because he was so insecure that she would dump him Why? Because he felt unworthy. Now, this is going to sound harsh, but when I have somebody telling me, either overtly through their words or subtly through their actions, that they're unworthy, that they have a compromised self-image, self-esteem, I know from a psychological perspective, the therapeutic thing to do is say, hey, that's not true. Come on, believe in yourself. That's not my approach. My approach is, hey, they know themselves better than anybody else. Maybe they're right. If somebody tells me I have a poor self-image, I'm not worthy, I have terrible self-image, who am I to second guess that? They know themselves better than I do. So maybe everything they use to criticize themselves, instead of me saying, oh, that's not true, you should change what you tell yourself, maybe you should write those things down and it should go on a to-do list. This should go on the fix-it list. And when I look at Brian Laundrie saying, hey, I don't feel worthy of her, I don't have confidence, maybe he's right. Maybe he is a flawed individual that has character flaws. That means he might not should be in a relationship with someone like her. Now, clearly, as I sit here today, I have the benefit of 20/20 hindsight and can see that he was way out of his league. She was so charming, so charismatic, so beautiful that she was threatening to him. He couldn't handle it. He was threatened by it, and we know how it turned out. And I'm saying that my theory about why second guess someone if that's what they're saying, rather than saying, no, don't say that to yourself, believe them and put those things on a to-do list for them to work on, to cure, to improve, to help. In this case, seems like he was right. But rather than confront his own issues, he seemed to cling to their relationship and tighten his grip instead of work on himself. The two began dating in March of 19, and within 9 months, Brian persuaded Gabby to move with him to Florida, where his parents had relocated. Now, the plan was to live in a condo that his parents owned. But then, just a little more than a year later, Brian popped the question. Now, while every couple moves at their own pace, you have to wonder, why was he in such a rush to have Gabby move in with him and become his fiancée? Those close to him suspected it had less to do with love, and again, more to do with his need to control her, to lock her up. Let's get this thing to the next level. Again, 20/20 hindsight makes this look really clear today, but when a relationship escalates quickly, especially with unhealthy dynamics, it may include love bombing. At first, being love bombed can feel exhilarating. The person on the receiving end is swept off their feet, lavished with affection, because that's what love bombing means. You're just told everything is wonderful and how great you are and how much you're loved, made to feel like you're just the most important person in the world. It's flattering, intoxicating, and undeniable ego boost when someone appears completely invested in you. But this isn't automatic. It isn't organic. It's no accident. It's by design. It's a form of psychological and emotional manipulation. It's a calculated effort to overwhelm someone with attention, gifts, declarations of love, and create a sense of dependency, because everybody wants to be accepted, everybody wants to belong, and while it can take different forms, it always includes excessive compliments, constant praise, over-the-top expressions of love, lavishing a partner with unnecessary or even unwanted gifts that make the person feel uncomfortable. intense conversations about marriage, moving in together, long-term commitments way early in the relationship. And it's often rooted in deep insecurity, real problems with trust, and powerful emotional dependency. Now, while anyone can exhibit these behaviors when they're infatuated with someone or they're in the process of falling in love, they're most commonly linked to people with anxious or insecure attachment styles or narcissistic personality disorder. You see it in cults, for example. It's how they kind of sweep people into cults. And people can learn this from their role models, parents or prior relationships. And early on, the person doing the love bombing will just focus on this and just do whatever it takes. And they'll just keep piling on until they get the result that they want. But then once they feel like they've got you, that infatuation fades. What once felt like affection now turns into expectation. Okay, I told you all that. I've expressed all that to you. So now I have this powerful expectation. I told you how much I loved you, how much I needed you, how much I'm willing to do for you and give to you. So now you owe me. Now you owe me. With that powerful expectation, if the person doesn't reciprocate, frustration sets in, and emotional and physical abuse is not far behind. Desperation sets in. As time went on, cracks in this relationship started showing up, and their communication started to break down. Gabby would grow distressed over their fights and the way Brian treated her, only to feel relieved and happy again once they smoothed things over. It was the roller coaster. Think about riding a roller coaster and how, as you're plummeting down that steep decline, how distressing it is. And then when you get up on the plateau, it's like, oh, it feels so good for that to quit. The turbulence in their relationship was even implied in the way Brian announced their engagement. After getting down on one knee during a camping trip, he shared the news on Instagram with the following caption, quote, "My biggest fear is that one day I'll wake up and it will have all been a dream, because that is what every second has felt like since the moment we found each other. Till death do us part, or until I wake up." I'm so happy the answer was yes. Love you, honey. Those words, his promise of till death do us part, given what we now know, just seems pretty chilling. Gabby's mother, Nicole, was stunned by how quickly the engagement happened. Tara and Joe Petito, equally surprised, raised their eyebrow at the fact that Brian hadn't involved Gabby's close-knit family in this event, nor had he formally asked for their daughter's hand in marriage. They liked Brian well enough. At this point, in their eyes, he seemed like a nice, polite young man. But he was certainly serious and didn't seem to have the type of energy Gabby would typically be drawn to. And that's the thing with toxic relationships. They breed secrecy because deep down, Gabby knew there were issues. And being loyal to Brian, she tried to protect him from outside judgment. Now, Joe Petito, what a terrific guy. Incredible father. I sensed that the moment I met him. He's a no-nonsense type of man, but he had no idea what was going on behind the scenes with Gabby and Brian. Take a listen. Did you ever witness them fighting?
No.
Did she ever talk to you about them fighting?
No. No, because listen, I'm a protective father. If my daughter cries, I'm going to fix the problem. You know what I mean? That's how I am. I don't like to see that. That's not something she's going to bring up to me because she knows that I'm going to get involved real quick.
Were you aware of the engagement, and did you go along with it? Were you okay with it?
Yeah. Listen, you know what? Listen, at the end of the day, if my daughter's going to be happy and she loves you and you love her, which is what I saw, I'm okay. You know, that's all I care about. You know, and that's it. My daughter's happiness.
However, the women in her life, like her mother and best friend Rose, sensed that Gabby wanted to keep her engagement under wraps, and that her excitement about the prospect of marrying Brian started to quickly wane. So at this point in the timeline, Gabby has moved with Brian to North Point, Florida. They're engaged fairly soon after. While they did live in Brian's parents' condo at first, his parents ended up selling that property, which forced the couple to move in to his parents' home. Now, according to Gabby's mother, Nicole, Gabby seemed to enjoy her time living with Brian's parents, Christopher and Roberta, at first. In the beginning, Gabby said Roberta was sweet and would even knit for her. But as time wore on, Gabby began to feel less comfortable in the Laundrie household. Nicole revealed that Gabby had confided in her about Roberta's discomfort with how much time Brian was spending with her. It seemed as though Roberta was oddly jealous of Gabby and Brian's relationship, becoming sullen and withdrawn whenever the attention wasn't on her. At one point, Gabby even suspected that Roberta had changed her mailing address back to her Long Island home, sending a clear message to Gabby that she just wasn't welcome there. Now, both Gabby and Brian knew their current living situation was not working out. Brian hadn't had a steady job, and it seemed like he was still trying to find his footing in life, and Gabby was eager for more travel. She wanted some adventure, hoping to start her own travel vlog. Now, Brian had always been a hiker and a camper, so he rationalized that he could bring that skill set and take it on the road. Inspired by the van life craze, Gabby used her hard-earned money to purchase a 2012 Ford Transit Connect. She decided she'd start a YouTube channel on which she would document her travels in the remodeled van, with Brian by her side. Now, excited, Gabby started working 50 hours a week at a local Taco Bell, working hard to save money for this new endeavor. Brian, of course, wasn't a fan of Gabby working so much. He wanted her home with him. And Gabby's friend Rose said that Brian became resentful. He would send Gabby texts chastising her for neglecting their relationship and for choosing to work at Taco Bell, which he called a bunch of lowlifes. Since quitting his Publix grocery store job, Brian was barely, if at all, working at this point, so for him to disparage someone making an honest living, that's just unnecessary. But it shows yet again that he's trying to be the one calling the shots in her life. In a highly manipulative move, Brian even called Gabby's mother and told her that Gabby was hanging out with a bad crowd. And at the time, Nicole believed him. He could be very convincing. Now, this is another red flag to note. Brian wanted to get people in Gabby's life on his side. He couldn't do it with Rose, her friend who witnessed day to day what was going on between them, so he tried to form an alliance with Gabby's mother, who was remote. She wasn't there seeing it every day. By this point, Gabby and Brian's arguments, whether over text or in person, had become a familiar pattern. More often than not, Brian would get angry with Gabby, but then become tearful. And Gabby would end up apologizing because he usually convinced her that she was at fault. Gabby would frequently have to reassure Brian that she wasn't going anywhere and he wouldn't lose her. Recall what I said just a little earlier, pursuing. You're always chasing in a relationship. According to Rose, even before their road trip, Gabby was beginning to see the light when it came to the major issues in her relationship, and she did attempt to set boundaries. In one text she sent to Brian, Gabby wrote, quote, "Don't try to control me because it only makes me mad. I love you so much, but it's the way you speak to me that hurts the most." Close quotes. Now that's a very concise, direct request on her part. Seems like it fell on deaf ears. Despite the issues between them, preparations for their new life continued, and before long, they were ready to hit the road. Before they set off on their journey, Gabby and Brian said their goodbyes to Gabby's mother, Nicole, and Nicole gave her daughter $200 for emergencies, wrapped her in a tight embrace. And as they hugged, Gabby suddenly began to cry. She really couldn't explain why. To this day, Nicole vividly remembers that moment. The last thing Nicole said to Brian that day about Gabby was, "You take care of her. Keep her safe." He looked back at her, smiled, and said, "I will." That was the last time Nicole would ever see her daughter Gabby alive. On our next episode, engaged couple Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie take off in their van, ready to document their travel stories online. But their tense relationship and Brian's volatile nature only get worse on the road. From a now infamous roadside police encounter to Gabby's suspicious disappearance that became nationwide news, it's all coming up on the next Mystery and Murder. I'm Dr. Phil.